an IT professional, you already know that 2020 has been a trying but also valuable year for IT. You've been able to accomplish things in shorter periods of time, perhaps, than ever before, and the business has realized the value of IT in ways that it maybe didn't previously. The question is, have you ever had a chance to talk to the CIO? Just have a casual conversation about how your efforts, your skills, and all of the long nights that you've spent over this last year have been able to affect the business and help it reach its goals. In this session, you're going to hear from Elizabeth Sampson. She's the SVP of Brookfield Renewable Partners, Chris Shigley, the CIO of Mannington Mills, and Chris Day, CIO of SolarWinds. And they're going to share their perspective about their 2020 team's efforts and also learn how empowered teams and executives allow IT pros to deliver more transformation in less time. So to discuss the challenges for 2020 in IT for medium and large businesses, please welcome Elizabeth Sampson, Chris Shigley, and Chris Day. Why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your organizations and maybe just one or two big surprises for IT in 2020?
Sure thing. Thank you for having us on here today. So I'm Chris Shigley. I'm the CIO for Mannington Mills. We're a privately held flooring company based out of Salem, New Jersey, and we've got manufacturing facilities along the East Coast, and we've got a UK operation and one in California as well. And like everyone else, we had a hard stop across a lot of our businesses. Now, our manufacturing footprint was able to continue operating as part of essential business. And so they continue to operate in the plants, but the offices pretty much dispersed and work from home. And so it was moving the entire office off-site within a couple of weeks time frame was the same challenge everyone else has dealt with. And, introducing that much change to a business in that short of time was a significant challenge. We did things that we could have never even dreamed of doing in the before times, as we're kind of calling it. And so making sure that everyone was connected safely and securely remotely was of paramount importance to us.
Yeah, so I work for Brookfield Renewable. I'm the Senior Vice President for Technology for our distributed generation assets, mainly distributed generation solar. And so we have a lot of assets in disparate locations all over the world, and especially in North America. And our biggest focus over this year, and the unfortunate, with COVID, those circumstances, but what we were able to really do was accelerate our roadmap. It really enabled what we had planned for, almost forced it to happen. And that allowed us to quickly move to where we really wanted to be is a lot more on that, being able to have that remote connection as well. So that was one of the biggest changes, of course, but also it really helped bring to visibility what IT was really doing, right? And a lot of executive management around what really went behind the curtain. And it often, led to a lot of legitimization around the IT spend, particularly around security and access. So that was, in a way, some of the silver lining in the situation.
Hi, Patrick. So I'm Chris Day. I'm CIO for SolarWinds. We're a high-tech company. We've got a whole portfolio of products that we sell up both on-prem and SaaS. 3,500 employees worldwide. And like everyone has said, COVID, really caused a major pivot in the business to very rapidly move from an organization that was really very office-centric, a lot of collaboration, a lot of engineering and teams working together. And all of a sudden, in a very short period of time, everybody working at home and trying to maintain that same level of velocity and collaboration was a huge challenge.
Do you all feel like IT was ready for this? I mean, you could sort of tell me in your organizations, was the team ready? Were employees of your companies ready? I mean, where were you on the scale of we're starting from zero to, hey, maybe we've had some success in previous years that we could carry forward?
Well, I'd say that in our case, we had gone through a very unfortunate ransomware attack last year. And so we had a significant event where we had to rebuild a bunch of things from scratch, and we're able to provide a lot of focus into more secure networks and being able to really release and set up those platforms. And so that really, a lot of the work we did then paved the way for us to have an easier transition to home. So there's a silver lining for all the stress and pain we went through last year. It's that we were prepared more for this year. We had rolled out just about everything except Microsoft Teams. And we had a 6-month plan to roll that out, which before this, because people weren't really open to change as much and getting people to make that change, it would have been difficult. We had a 6-month plan that we thought would probably stretch out beyond 6 months, and we finished it in 6 days. So having everyone trained at that point, and I actually did a good portion of the training myself with the team. So hundreds of people at a time on a Teams meeting, teaching them how to do it, learning it, 1 minute and training it the next. So it was madness, but it was excellent. It was adopted so well.
Yeah, I think we felt that IT was ready with everything for that transition. When it came to the employees, the users, the business, I think just because we had to get there, it just accelerated it. Again, I think to Chris's point, what would have taken longer in terms of just user adoption and change management really accelerated in a matter of just days. Similar to Chris, I think we also experienced in terms of a close call. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, a lot of things that happened last year really helped us to be ready from a security standpoint as well.
Do you feel like part of the focus that end users had on just change in general made that a little bit easier, or was this just the nature of changes that you rolled out in the past? It sounds like sort of training users and user expectation was a large part of what you were managing.
That's right. I mean, everything was there and ready to go. It just, there didn't seem to be a need to have to do this. But, the other piece is when everyone was remote, there was really a lot more of that formal and informal touch base and being able to just log on, do that over video, see each other. It gave that sense of, I don't want to say normalcy, but really making sure people were connected, people were good, they were healthy, they were engaged. And that really, people felt that they could go to Teams or all the collaboration to be able to do this. And I think that really helped with the productivity and continuation of work.
Well, and Chris Day, I mean, all you had to worry about was large teams of engineers, sales, support, training, and just sending everybody home globally in the period of about 2 weeks. So how ready do you feel you were?
Yeah, so I think the IT organization, as most organizations, have contingency plans, but most of those contingency plans assumed kind of a localized event, a hurricane or loss of a facility or something like that. They really hadn't been geared towards a global impact, and especially not for the duration that we've been under this for. So I think that was an aspect that was very different for this, and also not knowing how long it was going to be. I will echo the same thing that both Chris and Elizabeth said. There's nothing like a crisis to get everybody focused on, this is what we need to do. Everybody needs to pull together and we need to make it happen quickly. So that was one of the, kind of rewarding things, I guess. We saw, both the IT and the business working very closely together, just laser focused on what we needed to do. But when people started working from home, there was another whole dynamic that came into play, because it wasn't just an employee working from home, it was their spouses at home and their children are at home. And, you had these other personal things that people had to deal with. And so we made, it had a big focus on making sure that managers and employees were staying in close contact and frequent communication and, weekly updates from the CEO, recorded updates, to make sure that we were keeping some level of kind of social contact with everyone.
Too, about the CEO sending out notes. The owner, so we're a privately held company, family owned and professionally run. And the owner of the company, Keith Campbell, he was giving kind of like fireside chat videos every week through this whole process. And it was amazing to see him do it, because he's working with he started with his tablet or his laptop. Then he went to his iPhone. Then we got him a tripod with a boom mic, and he's doing multi-segment videos now. His game has gone way up, And it's a great communication tool for the employees. We've had many people say how much they appreciated that, being able to get that, from the top out to the entire organization, letting people know the state of the business and where we're at.
A lot of the communication snips that Kevin would send out were actually fairly short in duration. So we typically have regular all hands meetings and quarterly updates on the business, all those kinds of things. But Kevin made it a point to send out like a 5 to 10 minute video update every Monday. And we got a ton of feedback from people just saying how much they appreciated that and how they felt that we're a global company. So a lot of times people can't attend those all hands meetings because of time of day and these other things. And they really kind of connected with that weekly, kind of video update.
Elizabeth, did you find that you had just all the budget that you needed? And if you needed to go to the CEO and say, hey, I just need more, it would have come flooding in? Or was sort of the expectation that you were going to have to still work within a fairly constrained budget?
Yeah, I think that was still the expectation. I think if there was something that was critical, that was a gap that we really needed, I'm sure it would have come through. But I have to say, we were pretty much able to manage with what we had. And again, I think that's because this was really as part of the planned roadmap, only that it accelerated. So in a lot of ways, we were really well within what we needed to be in.
Yeah, I think the way it played out for our IT division was when it first hit, there was a little bit of a, don't let cost be an excuse. We need to get everybody productive. So it was, full speed ahead. Followed very quickly by we've had this unexpected hit. How are we still going to operate and stay within the kind of original plan, especially not knowing what, how long this was going to go or what the other impact to the business was going to be. But what we found is when we looked across our portfolio of projects, there was give and take. We had some projects that, to Elizabeth's point, got accelerated in. And then we had other projects, facility expansions and those kinds of things that we paused until, it became necessary. So we were able to still manage within our original budget. But it did, shift some things around.
And we took a very strong control position on spend at that point, and basically put a freeze on everything. Any discretionary spend had to be put on hold. So travel was easy, cutting that down, but looking at where we could reduce cost everywhere possible. And really the focus was, let's try everything we can to maintain the workforce that we have. Let's, if we didn't want to jump into that and wanted to protect jobs as much as possible. And so one of the things we did too is we started going out to our vendors and talking to our vendors and saying, what can you do to help us through this time? We were in a very healthy position, but we wanted to make sure that we were healthy in case this thing went on for a long time and the hit was significant. And so parts of our business were having a tail off in sales. Parts were still holding pretty strong at first. Nobody had any idea what was going to happen. So we went out to all the key vendors, and we had some key vendors out there that we were able to negotiate 3-month deferment in payments, and really helped us stretch out cash flow and make sure that we were in a much better position through this.
Well, Chris, that sounds like an awful lot of change. Resistance to change is never an issue for IT, ever. Everyone just wants to jump in. But did you find that there was a lot of willingness to go forward? Were there areas, maybe leadership or hands on the keyboard, IT pros, or maybe directors or other in-between managers? Where were areas that maybe there was a little initial resistance, or what worked really well?
Well, I think that with the tumultuousness of all this, the severity of it, the unknown of it, the toilet paper raids, all that thrown in the mix, nobody knew what to do, and so their resistance to change kind of dropped off. It's like everything is changing around me now. In normal course of action, like you're mentioning, the change element, the human element, is the most difficult of any project, no matter what business, no matter what what field, no matter what country. It's getting people to go from, I did it this way yesterday, I'm going to do it this way tomorrow, and bridging that gap. With all of this, people were changing everything in their lives. So embracing that change and getting that change done was much easier. And people that might have been concerned at this level, they dropped it way down low on the concern level, and we were able to really roll that out much faster. That's probably the biggest thing that we're driving through this is now is the time to change, because people are open to it. The time will close and that window will close, and people will, it's human nature. We'll revert back to, well, I like to do it this way. I like my email to look that way. I like my, I don't want to do any of that team stuff. All of that has, that just got thrown out the window with this. So we have this opportunity through this time frame to embrace this and keep driving change through as much as we can until things come back to the steady state again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we found that the resistance dropped dramatically. It was more of a everybody pulling together in a crisis. So I think historically we would have had more discussion and debate about, do we do it this way or do we do it that way, or here are my concerns, or this is why it might not work for me, and all of those kinds of conversations. Those just fell by the wayside. People were really focused on, we have to get people working and being productive and supporting the business. And so that was one positive that came out of it.
So it sounds like there's a lot of changes to collaboration and communication. Elizabeth, what are the effects in terms of prioritization and roadmaps? And do you think that it's just a tactical artifact now, or is there a chance to really carry that forward into 2021 and beyond?
Yeah. So one thing that we really noticed was when we had the luxury of being co-located in the same premises, you have a false sense of security that collaboration is happening. And it may not be the case, but it's a sense of security because you see people around you and you assume that. But when we shifted to the remote model and when people had to be very deliberate about collaborating, you really saw a sense of what that can really look like. So I think in the future, we're definitely going to go back to the office. We're definitely going to go back to a lot of what was normal in the past. But at the same time, I think this isn't going to go away. I think people find the ease to pick up the phone, get on a video call, collaborate, get a couple of people together. Even when we're not in co-located offices, there's a lot more of people being able to see each other and, read each other's facial expressions and collaborate now than they have been able to when they were in different offices and just joined 3 conference rooms from 3 different locations coming in.
So I'm hearing a lot about a lot of changes. One of the things that I think for everyone in IT, really beginning in 2019, was changes around security, finally. Do you feel like those previous issues with security were helpful in terms of making the changes for something maybe completely different, like endpoint security, when people are sitting at their home behind a home router on gear that you may or may not have the ability to update BIOS and everything else on?
Well, so again, we had, as I mentioned earlier, we had gone through a cyber event last year and had really revamped our entire security footprint. We felt we were in good shape. I think everyone does before something like that happens. And then when you find out you're not as good a shape as you thought you were. So as we rolled this out, we really rolled out a lot more controls across the platform, automated patching, standard versions of Windows. But the devices we've sent home, we're using Windows 10 devices that are all on a standard version and we're connecting by always on VPN. So we've established a connected link to the office to protect not only the people at home, but also protect ourselves. And that's worked better than I could have hoped.
Now, Elizabeth, you're operating in a very highly distributed generation environment, right? So you would think that you deal with endpoint or networks of many, many different types. So was it that different, or were you able to take some of the things that you learned as a part of your normal operations that actually scaled out to having sending more of the team home?
Yeah, no, it allowed for more of the team to be home and work that way, just because we were in a distributed and we are in a distributed environment. That's one of the things that we take for granted. That's our reality. And so it kind of played into it and helped us. It was an advantage. I have to say the other thing around just preparing for this was our DR and BCP planning that, I know we do these exercises year over year, and it just sometimes it's a tabletop, sometimes it's actual, and you just get into, well, this is just another exercise. We actually did one in December, and one of the scenarios where we couldn't access the office, and it was 2 weeks, and then it was 4 weeks. It was, of course, not, the scenario wasn't a pandemic, it was something else, but it played out. And, one of the things is a lot of things that we have the rigor for doing as IT year over year. And, when it comes to it, you have those organizational muscles that come into play, and everyone's able to actually make it successful.
Well, that doesn't sound like you're talking about technology there. It sounds like you're talking about process. So how much of what you had to accomplish in 2020 was about changing business engineering processes as opposed to technology engineering?
I'd say a big part of that was business engineering processes. And to what Chris and I talked about earlier was change management and adoption. But the technology was there, it was ready to be rolled out, but a lot of it was how do the different groups work together, come together. So that business process, that focus was really important. I think it's something that as technologists, we don't always think is that important, or we don't always focus on, but that's really what ties in back to the business. And that's really what, when we had our calls with our executives, weekly updates, every other day, kind of letting them know how things are going. That's where everyone was able to push and pull and make sure the processes work together.
I think one of the things that we saw was the processes and communication became much more deliberate. And we even started to see it in team meetings, where when people were meeting in person, kind of the working assumption was if you had something to say, you'd speak up. And then when we went to this more distributed virtual environment, what I saw over time was managers or scrum masters or whoever was, leading would actually poll through the room. Like if somebody wasn't speaking up, they would, kind of probe them a little bit more and ask them for their opinion, because otherwise the call would somewhat be dominated by one or two people. So I think that more deliberate behavior on making sure process is being followed and making sure that everyone's having a chance to collaborate and contribute, I think that is another aspect that we saw.
One thing that I've taken through this is as we started the Teams meeting, there was kind of an evolution. So initially it was, everybody's got to, everybody's fumbling their way through trying to figure out how to use it. Then all the cameras are on, then all the cameras go off, and it kind of evolved. But the thing that really became kind of problematic for us is the calendars became back-to-back Teams calls, to the point where you're spending all this time in Teams meetings. There was really no white space to actually do the things you talked about in the meetings. So we've actually started making sure people are booking white space, booking calendar events that people can't book over, to make sure there's white space to be able to work on the things you just talked about in the previous meeting before you jump into the next topic. And that's helped quite a bit. But it's been interesting to see the evolution, though, as we've gone through this. Hey, it's great. Then, oh my gosh, it just wears on me. Then you get reinvigorated again. But overall, it's been an absolutely phenomenal tool.
Well, it sounds like all of you had some pretty common experiences around technology, challenges with communication, but then also were surprised that things went pretty well. So let's switch as we come toward the end of this segment and just straight prognostication. What do you think the effects of 2020 and the things that you learned in 2020, how is that going to affect 2021 and the years going forward?
I think that this is going to stay with us for a long time. In fact, probably has changed the way that IT will think about things going forward. I think that the distance working, work from home, virtual environments, we've now proven, all companies have proven to themselves that that is something that they can do and that they can do effectively, and probably needs to become part of the fabric of how companies are planning on building their workforce prediction. That this won't be this will end and everybody will go back to the way it was. It'll be more that this will end and this will become part of the fabric that we operate in going forward.
And I have a slightly different take on it than that. I believe that we've jumped to remote and everyone's working remote now, and it's working for now. But I suspect as we start to come back into the office, those that choose to work from home, might have challenges down the road in career advancement opportunities because they're not working in collaboration in offices. I could be wrong with that, but it might be, I kind of see that would, as people come back, then all of a sudden it'll be like, well, why aren't you coming back as well? And that could change. I think that's going to take a couple of years to get to that point, but I feel that we will end up heading that way.
Yeah, I think one is IT's point of view on this, but I think the other part of what we take away from 2020 is what the business views about IT. I mean, let's be honest here. There was a crisis and IT came out to be the heroes of this, right? I don't know how a lot of this would have happened without IT stepping up and doing that, and the visibility that business has seen in terms of what IT can do. So I think that's changed a lot. So one of the big takeaways I would say to people in the trenches is learn how to speak that business language, because when you're able to communicate and get to that point of interfacing with the business and really articulating where the value is, this required a pandemic and this unfortunate situation to prove it, but there's a lot of ways to be able to do that. So I think that's one of the pieces. I'd say the other is, to Chris's point about people, the disadvantage of not being in the office. One of the things that we really need to think about is as younger people come into the workforce, first time people getting their jobs and being able to train and work there, there is an element of having to be in person, meet people and interact. That's going to be really important. So I think the future is going to hold a little bit of the mix between what we have today as a more remote to getting to a blend in the future.
I really like that point. I think that's a great way to end. IT has always been the department that can do just about anything. And I think what you're all saying is that with clearer communication and more awareness of what the business actually needs, and with obstacles pushed out of the way, they should be able to continue to do that going forward into the future. So all of you, Elizabeth, Chris, and Chris, thank you so much for being a part of this session.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.